closer, what do you see? It's a wider world. Everyone's different, fits beautifully.
It's a Wider World, and I'm Elizabeth Kelly with a special invitation just for you. From August 3rd through the 10th, the place to be is Michigan State University in East Lansing for the 2013 World Dwarf Games. If you're a sports fan or just love to hear an athlete's backstory, this is your chance to meet athletes from around the world up close and personal at this Olympic-style event. As a heads up, you'll want to pay particular attention to some intense rivalries between Team USA and both Teams Australia and Great Britain. So I got to spend a delightful morning with two incredible athletes whose commitment to disability sports lasted long beyond their personal time on the medal stand. And now they're part of the committee producing the 2013 World Dwarf Games. Meet Dr. Len Sawich and Duncan Wyeth.
Well, it's really great that we're here today at the Len Sawich residence, because I joke about it being kind of the cradle of dwarf athletics. In the early 80s, I was working in New York City and was part of the organizing committee for the '84 International Games. And kind of a little bit late in the process, I said one day to some of my colleagues, I know a person back in Lansing, a dwarf individual active with LPA, Little People of America. Let's go talk to him and see if we can recruit some dwarf athletes for the '84 games that were held at Hofstra University on Long Island. Unfortunately, we were late in the process, but it got the gears going. In 1985, the National Cerebral Palsy, les autres being a French term for the others, all the folks with disabilities that don't fit neatly in categories, were held here at Michigan State in our backyard. And so once again, we took our earlier meeting and parlayed that into a very significant, I think somewhere around 30 dwarf individuals who came to Michigan State to participate in a number of sports. And it was at those games that the Dwarf Athletic Association was founded.
I was sucked into the whole disabled sports thing by Duncan Wyeth. When I came out of the closet as a dwarf, I got active in the disability rights movement. And at that time, the disability intelligentsia had nothing to do with disabled sports, because we thought, those are jocks. We have important work to do to change the culture. We don't have time for fun and games. And it was through Duncan's influence that I began to understand that disabled sports was an opportunity to change the culture. And in fact, there's more leverage many times through sports to change the culture. I mean, look at what Title IX has done for women's sports, and look at what women's sports has done for respect and admiration for women in our culture. So sports is actually a key political leverage point for civil rights, for the disability movement.
I wanted to put that a little bit in historical perspective too, because the real disability sports movement comes in post-World War II. There were, in fact, athletic competition for deaf and blind athletes prior to World War II, but with a tremendous number of individuals who came out of that war, both military and civilian, with a whole range of disabilities. Games were founded in Stoke Mandeville, England, and grew from there. And so you saw an explosion, literally, in the 60s, the founding of Special Olympics, the founding in the 70s of the U.S. Cerebral Palsy Athletic Association, the Amputee Association, wheelchair sports in the 60s, all of them, and then of course in the 80s we added the dwarf to that, because there was a recognition that essentially sporting opportunities were not there for the vast majority of people with a broad range of physical and intellectual disabilities.
So I was primed when Duncan stopped by one day and said, look, we're having these international games in '84, and we ought to have some dwarf athletes there. And I was president of the Little People of America Foundation at the time, and I said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see if we can hustle some folks up, because I know there are some athletes. There was like Nancy Stewart, who was a little person crutch user who had a black belt in Taekwondo. And I knew of Chris Romano in the Detroit area, who was a power lifter. And I'm going, okay, those are the two athletes I know about in the entire country. You know, we've never really looked at organized sports for little people before, so I couldn't help. We didn't have enough lead time to bring athletes to the '84 international games. But the cerebral palsy and Les Autres games were going to be at Michigan State the next year in '85. We said, you know, what if we did some events dwarf on dwarf at those games? Could we get some folks to come? And the answer, of course, was probably. But we're going to have to be slick about it. So what we did is in '84, in late summer, we went to the Little People of America convention. And it's important to understand that there is a whole network of little people throughout the country that get together and under the auspices of Little People of America. Because dwarfism is a low incidence disability, and so the opportunity to be with other people like yourself usually requires travel. Okay? And even though 80% of dwarf children are born to average-sized parents, 20% of dwarf kids are born to dwarf parents. Okay? And how do you get a couple dwarf parents together when there's so much distance and it's such a low, you party. You have Little People of America, you get together on a regular basis. So it's a very family-oriented organization. Once a year they have a big national convention. We show up at the national convention and say, hey, let's party, and let's do it in the context of sports.
The real excitement for me, way back in '84, I remember we got a grant from Exxon at the time. But rather than the grant being to support the running of the games, it was a grant that was going to bring young people with disabilities into the games on Long Island from the tri-state, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. And I think as much as I enjoyed being a board member and the excitement of that game, my greatest excitement was seeing these young kids get off school buses, and for the first time in their life, they saw individuals like themselves with similar disabilities, maybe 10 years older, as athletes.
And so the plan to create a venue for dwarf athletes began to take shape.
Let's get a bunch of folks together, Michigan State, 1985, CP Les Autres games. Let's all we'll play basketball. You know, we'll do some pistol shooting. We'll do some track and field. Track and field. Give me a break. A Little People race. What are you going to have? A 10-yard dash? Hey, come on. It's going to be fun. We'll find out how competitive we can be once we have an opportunity to be competitive. And we're going to be competitive when it's little people against little people. And just see how that works. Well, as Duncan mentioned, over 30 dwarf athletes showed up for those games. We had such an outstanding time. Before we left campus, we formed the Dwarf Athletic Association of America.
The formation of the Dwarf Athletic Association of America was just the beginning. There were all types of things to consider as the DAAA envisioned their idea of sporting events for little people on the proverbial level playing field.
If you're going to be involved in sports that requires equipment, you've got to make a decision. How much of a modification am I going to make so that I can have fun and be competitive and still be able to find equipment? If we did dwarf basketball and only did it in places where you could lower the baskets down, there'd be very few places to practice. Most of us see professional basketball where people are dunking the ball all the time. And that's not the case in a lot of places where basketball is played. You know, dwarf basketball in general is a lot more like women's basketball than men's basketball, in the sense that there's a lot more focus on the distant shots and there's no dunking. I mean, we talked about working on a three-man dunk in dwarf basketball, but it's not worth the effort. One of the things for me that was really exciting about dwarf sports is for average-size parents, especially average-sized dads, who, in anticipation of the birth of their child, had whatever fantasies about their kid being a great baseball player, a pro basketball player, whatever, an outstanding swimmer, a triathlete, and then they find out that their child has a form of dwarfism, and they think, poof, all that's gone. You know, I wanted to be a sports dad. Now that's gone. Well, guess what? Since the invention of dwarf athletics, it's all back. You can be a sports dad. Now, bottom line, your kid has to be interested in sports. 2013 World Dwarf Games at Michigan State University is a homecoming because it's bringing dwarf sports back to the place it physically started, almost 30 years ago. So, for some of the folks of my era, we expect to see a lot of nostalgic reflection on how far we've come. For the bulk of the athletes who are coming, they have no idea of that historical tie because they're in their 20s, which means they grew up in a world where there was always an opportunity to be involved in dwarf sports. So there's an interesting juxtaposition of historical perspective, right? Based on who's coming and what age range they come from. I think there's an opportunity for us to try some new sports, which is very cool. We're going to be doing archery for the first time because of the outstanding resources at Michigan State University. We're going to do target shooting, which is a new sport for us, but it's a sport where there's potential for our athletes to go on from just the dwarf sports arena into the Paralympic arena if they truly are excellent and elite athletes. We're doing the traditional sports, so we're doing track and field, and volleyball and basketball. We'll be doing swimming and some of those kinds of sports. We'll be doing badminton, which is kind of a new sport for the U.S., but a big sport internationally for other dwarf sports programs. And soccer, which is becoming more and more a sport here, but of course internationally, soccer is the big deal. One of the things folks can look for is the underlying politics, because there's a bet between some of the leadership in the United States and in England whose junior soccer team is going to take the international title. And we'll see at closing ceremony who's wearing whose jerseys.
And so the countdown to the 2013 World Dwarf Games begins. If you love sports of all sorts, then the place to be on August 3rd is Michigan State to cheer for Team USA or Team Canada, or maybe just that athlete who captures your heart. See you at the games. What happens when some of the tallest basketball players in the world are pitted against some of the shortest athletes? Well, the result is a great game, and even better, it's all for a good cause, supporting the 2013 World Dwarf Games. Take a look. It's billed as the celebrity team versus the statesman, but actually, there are celebrities on both teams.
About 4 or 5 years ago, me and my friend Matt Roloff from Little People Big World, we started a charity for dwarfs. It's called CODA, which stands for Coalition of Dwarf Advocacy. Our main goal, mine anyway, is to help get dwarf children adopted. This particular game here is actually to raise money for the 2013 World Dwarf Olympics, which is going to be at Michigan State this summer, first week of August.
I talked with some of the statesmen about the game.
So what do you think your biggest challenge is going to be today with the game?
Shutting down TJ probably, but that won't be too hard.
I know my guys are all pumped up. We have some new guys and some other guys have left, but my new core, I think, is they're young, they're fast, and they're hungry.
So how did the statesmen feel about taking on the celebrity team?
They're coming extra hard, so we just got to step our game up, but it won't be that hard because they got nothing on us.
It looks like we got some Michigan State basketball players, and Don played for the Pistons, and TJ's no slouch, even though he played football. I think this might have been the toughest game so far.
The celebrity team is preparing as well.
So what do you think is going to be your biggest challenge during the game?
Not rebounding the ball and putting it back into score, because you have to let the ball hit the ground first on a rebound, and you can't pass. You got to bounce past everything. So I think that's going to be the hardest part.
And we only have 2 rules for this game, which is really just kind of evens it for us, and it's called the no rebound rule, which means if the ball goes up and hits the backboard of the rim, they have to let it hit the ground before they grab it. Otherwise, we would never get it. And they have to bounce pass, so there's no cherry picking we still use a 10-foot height. The only difference is we're using a ladies ball, which is one size down from a pro ball.
I'm 6'9", 296. Some of the guys, most guys out here are well over 6'5", 6'6". So normally in a traditional game, we'd be throwing the ball over people's heads, getting the rebounds and scoring. Can't do any of it. So it's like taking away what you do best. It's just like taking a paintbrush from an artist.
Sounds like the celebrity team is a bit worried about taking on the Statesmen.
Any thoughts about today's game? How are you staying mentally prepared and ready for the game?
You know, just keeping my mind on the game and not thinking about anything else. Just looking to have some fun with it and put out a good game for everybody and just keep staying loose and warm it up.
I don't know. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we'll let the final buzzer tell the tally. But it'll become us on top, so don't worry about that.
So tell me a little bit about the game.
You know, Elizabeth, it's a lot of fun. It's on raising money, of course, for the Dwarf Olympics, the Dwarf Olympic team. And I think the thing that's a lot of fun, they're going to take a lot of big guys, a lot of former athletes, and you're going to play this team of people who, some of them don't even come up to my waist. I'm 6'9". And of course, the rules make it a little more interesting, but it's a lot of fun. I mean, you've already looked, the place is packed. It's going to be a great time.
Well, this helps like to do things. It's for CODA, for help dwarf babies get adopted. We raise money for that, and then it's for the World Dwarf Games in August. Dwarfs from around the world will come and compete in basketball, soccer, track and field, and other various events. It's creating awareness for dwarfs, you know, because we're trying to get the word out there. And this being in Lansing, Michigan, in the United States, is very big. You know, it's a big spot in Michigan, and it's just big for dwarfs because it's like the Olympics for us, and you know we're all training and we want to compete for the gold, and we take it pretty serious when it comes down to game time, and it gets pretty competitive. So we're looking forward to it, and you know just getting in shape and ready for it.
We're the gold medal winners from Ireland. We were at the World Games 4 years ago, and we beat them from Australia, England, all over the place. And it was a long tournament, but we were number one. We're also number one in soccer too, but we don't really brag too much about that.
Now, how long have you played with the Statesmen?
Probably since 2009, when we put the team together and we went to Ireland for the World Games. So ever since then. And yeah.
Now, how'd you do in the World Games in Ireland?
In basketball, we took gold, and in soccer, we took silver.
Cool.
Yeah, it was pretty intense in soccer. We lost in a shootout in overtime. And then basketball, it was a pretty exciting game. So it was fun, a lot of fun.
We're serious. I mean, this is our one time to shine, you know. So I'm actually hoping that since it's at Michigan State this summer, hopefully we get people to come out and watch, because normally it just ends up being us watching ourselves or their parents, which is cool, but it's not the same as having, you know, 1,000 people cheering you on or stuff like that. So I'm really hoping that we can get that this summer.
It's important because it's about everything but the game. It's about raising money for things that are so critically important, and it's about raising, you know, those of us who are big guys who maybe played sports or in the media and covered sports, you know, we've had a lot of wonderful advantages in our lives and a lot of great things happen to us. And this is an opportunity to say there are some people that don't have those advantages, but they're just as important, just as special, just as great, and it allows people to see that. You know, Elizabeth, one thing in our country, we're divided. We're divided politically. We're divided along a lot of lines. And anything you can do to show what unites us is so much bigger than what divides us. I think that's what's more important than anything today.
Well said. Now here's your special invitation to attend the World Dwarf Games from Marty Kleba.
Hey, this is Martin Kleba from Project X and Pirates of the Caribbean. We're going to be at the World Dwarf Games here this summer at Michigan State from August 3rd to the 10th. Please come on down and cheer us on and support us.
This great game was only a preview of what to expect this August at the World Dwarf Games in Michigan. For more information about the 2013 World Dwarf Games, check out 2013worlddwarfgames.org. And if you want to learn more about Marty Kleba and Zach Roloff's charity CODA, that information can be found on Facebook. So let's finish up the show with a peek at some of the athletes who are training at the Demmer Center, one of the competition sites for the World Dwarf Games. Take a look.
Well, Michigan Rehabilitation Association is a group of professionals from the field of disability. So really anybody associated with the rehabilitation field, from the consumer through the rehab professional. So anybody that is dedicated to enhancing lives of people with disabilities. So this is why this type of organization and event is so important for us, because we just want to spread the message that all of us involved in disability issues should partner and get the word out as much as possible. I think it's really important that everyone understand and see the accessible options there are for folks with disabilities, and honestly, a lot of the accessible options are great for anybody because they open a lot of doors for people of all ages. So it's important to see that. This is a very important day, and we're happy to be involved in it every year. Well, I think the fun part of shooting is, especially here at Denver, is that they do it with instructors who are enthusiastic about the shooting sports, and so they are very willing to show anyone, young or old, or any kind of ability, that it's really for everybody. It's safe if done the right way, and that's why you see people out there for the first time after they get used to it, really enjoying it and doing well.
I feel like this is a great idea for people that are living with disabilities. That really, you have like a lot of different sports, but not so much the ones geared for like outdoor camping or archery, rifle, yeah. And it's nice. It's very nice. Because living with a disability, like it can be very challenging and hard, but I feel like it's all about the person. Like if they feel like they want to try something new, like for instance shooting, like I knew I wasn't going to be good at it, but I was like, why not try it? It's an opportunity. And like hand cycling, I never thought in my life that I would, take first place in the female division for hand cycling, and yet, here I am, like setting my mind to it, and I went out and did it. So it's exciting.
One of the reasons is a lot of folks are not aware of what technology and adaptive equipment there is to enable them to get outdoors and to become involved in outdoor recreation. And there's so many opportunities for everything you can think of, whether it's adaptive mobility devices, whether it's something like a hunting blind or equipment to allow a person to shoot, something to stabilize the gun, something like a crossbow or adaptive bows to be able to hunt so you don't have to have the pull strength. You name it, there's just so many things, adaptive kayaks, equipment for fishing, biking, and also groups that will help get people out and teach them how to do the sport if they haven't done it before. And Denver Center is one of those places. So as a department, we've been trying, first of all, to expose our staff and as we have law enforcement that work with us, with our wonderful conservation officers, exposing them to the adaptive equipment and the technology and things that support people being able to recreate. Well, one of the things that has happened as a state is with the Department of Natural Resources, the only way that we can provide accessible outdoor recreation throughout the state, and especially when it comes to infrastructure development, considering that most of, like in our recreation and parks, that infrastructure originally was off Civilian Conservation Corps days, so it's really old stuff, which was not accessible at all. And to allow us to move forward, to provide where it makes sense, accessible trails, pathways, camping, fishing, you name it, boating, all of those types of things. That does take work, but it also does take resources. And we do a huge amount of collaboration as a department. In fact, that is one of the modes of the ways we do business. We have been very fortunate in Michigan that we have a lot of organizations that we partner with. An example of that partnership is with our Accessibility Advisory Council, which is a citizens council made up of a lot of different organizations. Organizations that put on the demonstration day to day, like Michigan Paralyzed Veterans Association, Brain Injury Association, Michigan Rehabilitation Association, all sorts of different organizations that are involved. And it's exciting to work with them.
I would say come out, and most people are apprehensive to try adaptive equipment, but if it can get you into doing stuff that you've done before, come try it. There's the technology nowadays is unbelievable what they can do, and some is expensive and some is just ingenuity that you can dream up and make it work for you to shoot a crossbow or a compound bow or even a gun, I'd say come try it, experiment.
The 2013 World Dwarf Games promises to be a great international competition. A Wider World will be covering the games, so make sure you come over and say hello. We'd love to meet you. Well, take good care of yourself, and I'll see you next week.